the historic Hudson River. From the George Washington Bridge to the city of Poughkeepsie and the Catskill Mountains beyond. The last canoe and kayak club on the Manhattan shoreline.
There used to be boathouses all up and down the river, even before the George Washington Bridge was built.
A world-famous research facility.
Lamont, Doherty is a 100-acre estate where scientists, engineers, technicians make science happen.
And flying in style above the Hudson River.
I've seen the Colorado, I've seen the Mississippi, and none of them compare to the Hudson River Valley.
Now, 50,000 kilometers of eastern coastline are revealed from above. An aerial journey over America's rugged Atlantic frontier. This is America over the edge. Just west of Manhattan and north of the Statue of Liberty, New York Harbor meets the mouth of the Hudson River. The Hudson River extends more than 500 kilometers north. It is named after English explorer Henry Hudson, the first European to chart these waters. Here in the New York metropolitan area, the river serves as a political boundary, dividing New York and the state of New Jersey. It lines all of Manhattan and communities like Hoboken, Union City, and Edgewater on the New Jersey side. Beneath the river, tens of thousands of vehicles pass by each year through the Lincoln Tunnel and the Holland Tunnel. And on the water, the river serves as a maritime highway north, a conduit for all types of commercial goods to the cities of Newburgh, Kingston, and beyond. At the northern end of Manhattan, the George Washington Bridge connects the New York neighborhood of Washington Heights with New Jersey's Fort Lee. The bridge is named after the first U.S. president who staged an attack against British forces from this spot during the American Revolution. The British had captured New York, and Washington wanted to end the occupation. But the plan failed. Washington was forced to evacuate thousands of American troops across the river to New Jersey. From the air, we have a unique perspective on the massive effort that would have been. When the George Washington Bridge was completed in 1931, it boasted the longest main bridge span in the world. It held the record for 6 years until the completion of San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. Today, the George Washington Bridge carries 106 million vehicles each year. But beneath the constant chaos of this double-deck suspension bridge, peace and tranquility can be found on the water.
We're at the Inwood Canoe Club. Beautiful northern Manhattan. This boathouse has been around for a while. I've been coming here for about 11 years, and every time I come out here, can't beat it.
The Inwood Kayak and Canoe Club has been operating since 1902, when similar clubs lined the Manhattan shoreline.
I mean, before my time, there used to be boathouses all up and down the river. Even before the George Washington Bridge was built, there were boathouses, and in the days before air conditioning, everybody wanted to come down to the river in the summer. With the way things went over the years, we are the only surviving boathouse from that era in Manhattan.
Today, the club is perfect for dedicated members like Kevin McKeon.
So I'm going to take out the sea kayak I normally use when I go out paddling. It's a nice, comfortable boat, and it's pretty easy to carry. So just got to put the hatches on and get set up. Okay, so I usually bring it down to the float here, and this is a new float. We just made it. We're all real excited about it.
Today, McKeon is happy. Poor weather early in the day has vanished, and the Hudson River is as calm as it gets.
Yeah, so it's good being out on the water. Now, right now it's pretty calm right here. But if you go out a little further, you're gonna get some current. Doesn't look like it's that strong right now, but, and the weather, yeah, this is great, it's holding up. So, right now I'm facing downriver towards the George Washington Bridge, and there's a tugboat pushing a barge there. So you do see a lot of commercial traffic, not a whole lot up here, but you see a pretty steady stream throughout the day of tugs and barges, and maybe once in a blue moon you'll get a ship. So this is typical for this time of day on the river. And right now I've got the place to myself. There's nobody else out here paddling. It's Thursday afternoon, and pretty nice, pretty nice.
Today, the Inwood Kayak and Canoe Club is a recreational organization. But in the glory days of Hudson River boating, it was a different story.
The history of our club was such that we had people that went to the Olympics and competed. Well, we have a board back there that lists all the people that went to the Olympics and that have won medals. So, you know, they would come out here every day and train. But that's a while back since we've had anybody go to the Olympics. We haven't really been a racing club probably for a good 20 years or so.
As Kevin McKeon returns to shore and prepares to close up shop for the day, he's carrying on a century-old legacy at the last club of its kind on the Hudson River.
We've got a great group of members here that keep this place going. It's been around since 1902, and I'm just happy to be a part of it. A lot of the people who come here are basically, who are members now, are basically recreational kayakers. New York City is pretty much an urban atmosphere, and a lot of people tend to forget that it's really an island and that you're right on the water. So it's a great opportunity to get out there with nature. And I'll tell you the truth, when I go out and paddle on the weekends, I'm out there in the middle of the river or upriver, and it's like there's hardly anybody around. I can't believe it. It's just a wonderful resource, and not as many people as could be are taking advantage of it.
Continuing north from the George Washington Bridge, the western banks of the Hudson River begin to rise. Here on the New Jersey side, the Hudson River Palisades extend more than 30 kilometers north. The Palisades are steep cliff faces that rise as high as 165 meters and can be seen from the northernmost reaches of Manhattan. The Lenape Native Americans called the Palisades Weehawken, or rocks that look like rows of trees. Today, Palisades Interstate Park is home to 100,000 acres of parkland in New York and New Jersey. The park is a joint effort between the states, dating back to 1900, to protect this national natural landmark from quarries and other development.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required.
"25 kilometers north of the George Washington Bridge, the New Jersey state line veers inland. From this point north, New York State lines both banks of the Hudson River. And hidden in these magnificent hills is a world-famous research facility where scientists investigate the origins, evolution, and future of the natural world.
Lamont Doherty is part of Columbia University. It sits up on top of the cliffs on the edge of the Hudson River. And here is a 100-acre estate where up to 500 scientists, engineers, technicians, and all the people who help make science happen work. Lamont's the place where it's often considered the birthplace of plate tectonics, the place where we learned that the continents move and apart from another and crash into one another. It's also the birthplace of paleoceanography, how we figured out that the ocean records change over millions and millions of years and changes chemistry of the small things that are recorded and saved in the bottom of the ocean.
Robin Bell is a specialist in ice and is looking to answer some of the great challenges facing the world.
I, like many scientists at Lamont, like to look inside things and understand how they work. And what I'm very keen to understand now is how the ice sheets are changing. I work in both Antarctica and Greenland, where we know that the ice sheets are changing. We see the edges dropping, we see the edges speeding up, and we see the edges losing weight, just like they're on a diet. The science we're doing is trying to understand how and why this is happening and what's going to happen in the future.
And in her research lab at Lamont Doherty, Robin Bell has access to some of the world's most advanced technology.
So there are two things people love to see when they come to Lamont, and this is one of them. This is the ice pod imaging system that we use to go explore how the ice sheets are changing, look through several miles of ice, take the temperature of the surface, and measure how deep the water is around the edge of the ice sheets.
This system, mounted on the side of a plane, produces an image that is clear to see.
We're now going to look at an example of the kind of data that the ice pod takes when it flies over the Greenland ice sheet. And this is a cross-section of the Greenland ice sheet. So this is the sky where we fly the aircraft. This is the ice surface where scientists can walk, we can land airplanes, we can drill holes. This is the 2 kilometers of ice, and this is the rock beneath the Greenland ice sheet. And as you can see, it thins and thins and thins towards the edge where the ocean sits out here. This is the part of the ice sheet where the change is happening. This is where, when we measure from space, we can see the edges dropping, the ice flowing faster to the ocean, and when we measure its mass, it weighs less than it used to.
In addition to studying polar ice conditions today, Bell can look for clues in the past. This is the Lamont Doherty Core Depository.
The other place at Lamont that people love to come visit is the Lamont Core Collection. And this is where, for the past 6 decades, Lamont scientists have been collecting samples from the bottom of the ocean floor. And they send tubes down to the bottom of the ocean floor and bring back samples. What we can see is how the oceans have changed over time and how each ocean has experienced changing climate differently.
Each of these tubes holds a sample of soil gathered from beneath the sea. The sediment samples contain records of tsunamis, landslides, and icebergs.
So here's a sample that was taken in the North Pacific, and you can see it's almost dusty in places, and this is what scientists would go in and sample, and they'd look for the microfossils, the little remnants of creatures and plants that lived in the ocean, and it will tell them about how climate and currents and ocean behavior change. You can see this is almost like dust here, and this is what becomes basically gold for scientists trying to understand the chemistry of our oceans and how things have changed in the past. And understanding the past is how we're going to help understanding what's going to happen to our planet in the future.
But while Robin Bell's research is on a global level, the implications of her work have an impact here at home.
There are 3 big ice sheets on our planet, 1 in Greenland and 2 in Antarctica. The one in Greenland is melting at the surface. The one in Antarctica, in West Antarctica, is the one that is changing the fastest because it has its base in the ocean, which is warming. And that's the one that we think could change sea level in North America on the order of 20 feet. What we know about sea level is if we were to go down to the very tip of Manhattan, we know that since the 1800s, when my grandmother was born, it's gone up about 11 inches, so about almost up to my knee. We know that the models tell us in the future the ice sheets will keep on changing, and we expect to see that rate of sea level continue to increase.
And far below the Palisades, on the Hudson River, one group is looking to protect and preserve the ecological future of this waterway. Carl Copeland is with Riverkeeper.
The Hudson River has been used by people for longer than recorded history. I mean, the Native Americans were here for millennia, and this was, they called it the river that flows both ways. When Henry Hudson came to the river and explored it, he described it as being teeming with wildlife and fish and just a rich resource. And it still is one of the richest water bodies in the whole Atlantic Basin.
But in more recent years, the Hudson has suffered pollution and contamination from industrial operations lining these waters.
Like everywhere else in the United States, the Industrial Revolution, the 19th, the first half of the 20th century, people just didn't care what went into the water bodies. They used to say you could tell what color they were painting the cars because you'd look at the color the Hudson River was flowing that day.
Finally, after years of devastation, local residents took action.
Back in the 1960s, a group of fishermen, actually, recreational fishermen and commercial fishermen on the Hudson were really upset with the pollution, with the fact they couldn't sell their fish because they tasted like oil, and they couldn't use the river for swimming anymore. And they decided to organize, and they organized something called the Hudson River Fishermen's Association.
They started a grassroots effort to counter the industrial impact on these waters. Riverkeeper was formed as a full-time advocacy group. They have slowly made gains, helping to preserve much of the natural splendor lining the river.
So this is Hook Mountain over here. It's part of the Palisades Ridge, which extends all the way down the river to New Jersey, right across from Manhattan Island. And this is all state park from here, from Upper Nyack all the way up to Haverstraw, about 7 or 8 miles. And it's amazing that this really scenic, wild viewpoint on the river is so close to New York City and so close to the populated areas of Westchester and Rockland counties. And we're really lucky to have this kind of resource here as a recreational opportunity, as a way to connect people to these vistas and to the history and the natural environment of the Hudson. And it's also a great natural resource for the environment, too. Some of the biggest environmental challenges still facing the Hudson River include, we still have polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, in the sediments in the river. These were dumped by industrial manufacturers north of Albany during the middle part of the 20th century, and they're still there. And the PCBs and the sediments still contaminate the striped bass and the other fish in the river, which is the reason there's no commercial fishery for striped bass in the Hudson now.
And just south of the village of Nyack, one industrial project is reminiscent of past challenges.
So we don't have so much industry left on the Hudson. You see in the background here, they're actually rebuilding the Tappan Zee Bridge right now. They're building a new bridge. Interesting project. Can't say that that we were all in favor of it. Huge environmental impacts, pile driving, dredging, all the boat traffic. There have been a lot more dead sturgeon, endangered sturgeon reported in the Tappan Zee while that project's going on.
Carl Copeland has sailed the Hudson River for most of his life. He says despite the victories advocates have enjoyed, the fight will never stop.
I've been doing this, working with Riverkeeper for over 20 years now, and some of the cases we're working on, like fighting power plants and their impacts of sucking fish from the river and killing them, still are the same battles we were fighting way back before I got there, even in the 1970s. And what I like to tell people is, you know, when you're fighting these environmental battles, when you win, it doesn't mean you've saved the environment. You've won the right to keep fighting to protect the environment from the next threat. And that's basically what we're doing.
North of the village of Nyack and the town of Haverstraw, we head inland above Bear Mountain State Park. And from high above, the true scope of these rolling hills can be felt. Bear Mountain State Park covers 21 square kilometers. A popular destination for biking and hiking. It also offers incredible vistas of the Hudson River, from Perkins Memorial Tower, high atop Bear Mountain. But the most striking feature here is the vast expanse of forest beyond. Bear Mountain State Forest is connected to Harriman State Forest. Together, they are part of the northeastern coastal forests ecoregion. 89,000 square kilometers of pristine nature, from Delaware to Maine. Far below, Bear Mountain Bridge marks the only river crossing between Nyack and Newburgh. The bridge was constructed in 1924 and was the longest suspension bridge in the world until the completion of the Benjamin Franklin Bridge in Philadelphia. The Bear Mountain Bridge was the first automobile crossing to span the Hudson River south of Albany. Five kilometers north, we return to civilization, above one of the most famous military facilities in the world. This is the United States Military Academy, known as West Point. West Point was established by U.S. President Thomas Jefferson in 1802. And turns out 1,000 Army cadets each year. Today, the crowds are arriving to watch Division I football, with the Army West Point Black Knights taking on the Bucknell Bisons from Louisville, Pennsylvania. Beyond West Point, at the Hudson River village of Nelsonville, the hills rise even higher. These are the Hudson Highlands. The Hudson Highlands are part of the Appalachian mountain range, with the hills' rounded tops molded by glaciers passing through the Hudson River Valley. The rock in these hills is more than 1 billion years old. And the hills lead to the city of Newburgh, located in Orange County. Newburgh was first explored by Europeans when Henry Hudson stopped here in 1609. Later, it marked the base of operations for the Continental Army during the American Revolution. Centuries later, Newburgh enjoys a different claim to fame. It is a hub for motorcycle enthusiasts in America, a legacy that can be seen at Newburgh's Motorcyclepedia Museum.
The collection of motorcycles represents about 100 years of collecting, 60 years with my dad and about 40 with myself. My dad collected primarily or exclusively Indians, and myself probably the Harleys and the other brands, including the choppers.
Ted Doring began restoring and collecting bikes decades ago, a passion that led to one of the most impressive collections of motorcycles in the world.
So growing up on a farm, basically my dad had a lot of old motorcycles that, not in great condition, but they did run. There's plenty of acres to ride around, so probably 10 or 12 years old riding, and then when I got to be in my teens, thinking, I want to quit college, that's not that much fun, started working around the motorcycle business. So total, there's over 500 motorcycles in number in the museum. They were in storage probably since the 1950s, 60s in garages or warehouses, and then in 2010 we decided to put them on public display.
Amazingly, the motorcycle timeline here stretches back to the 19th century. This powered tricycle was built by the French company de Dion-Bouton.
So this section would represent the origin of the motor bicycle, and later they called it the motorcycle. This is the oldest running motorcycle in North America, 1897.
In 1902, a similar model would be used to set a land speed record, as French racer Georges Osmond reached speeds of more than 109 kilometers per hour.
I think I waited many years or decades to find an example like this, so this is definitely, I would say, my favorite.
But the largest section of the museum honors Ted Doring's father and his interest in the Indian motorcycle.
This is the Indian timeline of the American-made Indians, made in Springfield, Massachusetts. Most people consider them the true Indians, beginning in 1901. Certainly, it's basically just a bicycle with a motor. They started with that, and then as time went on, it gets heavier. One of each year is represented. In 1904 was the first twist grip, which is on today's motorcycles, the same. They powered the ignition with a dry cell battery. It would take 3 batteries to fire the coil. For Indian, they kept growing pretty well, and their largest year was 1913. That was Indian's best year, you know, before and after. So that probably was the pinnacle of the Indian Company at 32,000 units. They did develop the first electric start motorcycle in 1914, and Harley didn't have an electric start until 1965. So I think they spent a lot of their money in developmental costs.
The Indian timeline continues to 1953, when the Springfield, Illinois factory ceased operations.
It just kept getting heavier and heavier, and then in the late 30s, early 40, they developed the idea of the skirted fender. This is an example of the 1953 model. It's the last Indian produced in Springfield, Massachusetts. As you can see, they were way down in production. They went down to 500 units the last year. They're saying the last one was built in May of that year.
And while Indians were the favorite of Ted's father, Ted himself came on the scene when a different style bike was all the rage.
Okay, we're in Chopper City, the Chopper City Gallery. This would be an example of one of the earliest choppers, probably late 60s, a lot of handmade components. The rider did this himself, hand painted, a lot of just handiwork, and everything's his own, done on a relatively limited budget. So I think the choppers, as crude as they are, they pretty much define a pretty narrow section of time culturally. So this one would have been probably during Vietnam. Maybe he came back from Vietnam, but using car headlights. So he put a grenade for the foot peg, folds down, of course that's all welded by hand. So I think anything to get attention. But I think a lot of times too, people ask, oh, why do the motorcycles want to make so much noise? But it's kind of like when a cowboy rode into town, he would start shooting his pistol to say, hey, I've arrived. So the motorcycle guy has loud pipes, hey, I'm here.
Finally, downstairs, the museum is home to a wide variety of famous and historic bikes.
So now we're entering the downstairs gallery. This is the police section. So this is our local police motorcycle, City of Newburgh. They still use motorcycles. The police like motorcycles because they can get attention and people actually notice when they're directing traffic or trying to get things under control. So we have a Washington, D.C. police. This was from Richard Nixon's era, and I believe this escorted him out of the Capitol when he resigned. This is the JFK police bike from the motorcade. This is the pride of the collection, I think because of the history and the feelings where everybody understands that day in Dallas. It's actually in 1964. It was brand new in September of that year. They were radio controlled, and they were the first ones to actually send word back that the president was shot. We hope we can preserve it for another 50 years.
Continuing north, the city of Poughkeepsie marks one of the most famous destinations on the Hudson River. Poughkeepsie is the halfway point between New York City and New York's capital, Albany. Its unique name comes from the Wappinger Native American language. Upuku Ipising translates to the reed-covered lodge by the little water place, a reference to a nearby stream emptying into the river. And from the air, we enjoy an amazing view of one of the Hudson's most innovative and scenic attractions. The Poughkeepsie Highland Railroad Bridge is better known as the Walkway over the Hudson. A steel cantilever bridge more than 2 kilometers long. It was completed in 1889 and carried trains east to west over the river for 85 years, until it was damaged by fire. Community groups saw an amazing opportunity, and after restoration and preparation, the bridge was opened as a walkway in 2009. Now known as Walkway over the Hudson State Historic Park, it is the longest footbridge in the world, visited by 500,000 people each year. Beyond Poughkeepsie, the Hudson River is lined by a series of mansions and historic homes. On the east bank of the river, the home of Franklin D. Roosevelt Historic Site marks the birthplace and burial site of the 32nd U.S. President. The home we see today was designed and remodeled by Roosevelt himself. Roosevelt visited here 200 times during his presidency, and the mansion became known as the Summer White House, hosting visits by King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, as well as Canadian Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King. In 1943, Franklin D. Roosevelt gave the property to the American people, and today it is operated by the U.S. Park Service as a National Historic Site. The grave of President Roosevelt can be seen on the lawn of this magnificent estate. And just beyond the home of Roosevelt, the Vanderbilt Mansion National Historic Site is even larger. From the air, we can truly appreciate the size and scope of this riverside estate. A perfect example of the homes built by wealthy industrialists of the Gilded Age. Completed in 1899, the Vanderbilt Mansion features 54 rooms and covers 2 acres. For Frederick Vanderbilt, it marked a perfect location in the heart of the scenic Hudson Valley, yet close to New York City and Vanderbilt's New York City Railroad. Finally, beyond the home of Roosevelt and the Vanderbilt Mansion, and set back from the river, one of America's most iconic landscapes can be seen. The Catskill Mountains are the gem of southeastern New York State. They cover 15,000 square kilometers and rise more than a kilometer high. Back to the river. The Esopus Meadows Lighthouse is located on the west side of the Hudson River. It is built on a strong granite foundation, with piles driven deep into the riverbed below. The current structure was built in 1871 and is the last surviving wooden lighthouse on the Hudson River. And the light marks the gateway to another historic New York community. Kingston was the original capital of New York State and was burned to the ground by the British in 1777. Through the 19th century, the city became an important transportation hub, a crossroads for road, river, and rail. But like Newburgh's connection to motorcycles, Kingston and nearby Rhinebeck hold a link to aviation history in the Hudson River region. The Rhinebeck Aerodrome began as a hobby for aviation pioneer Cole Palin. But what started as a pastime quickly grew. And while Palin died in 1993, the legacy he built continues.
The old Rhinebeck Aerodrome was founded in 1959 by a gentleman named Cole Palin. He made everything we see here on the field and created a museum full of old airplanes, old cars, old motorcycles, anything that was, vintage and essentially turn of the century up through the mid-1930s. It all started out as just Cole had 6 airplanes that he bought at auction from Roosevelt Field down on Long Island. They were original World War I, aircraft that had flown in the war and were in a museum down there at the airport. He assembled these airplanes and put them back together and made them fly. And he would start flying them on the weekends, really just because he enjoyed flying old airplanes.
Gradually, others became interested in the Hudson River's aviation legacy and the potential for an aerodrome. The facility we see today was established in the 1960s.
We're always trying to give the look and feel of an original kind of, grass strip airport out of the 1920s. Everyone who's here tends to be interested in vintage, antique things.
All over the aerodrome, aviation history is being brought to life, including a project that has been in the works for 2 decades.
So there's a lot going on at the museum right now. You can see in front of us is the final stages of our completion of our Spirit of St. Louis reproduction. This will be a faithful reproduction of the Spirit of St. Louis, which was built by Ryan Aircraft Company for Charles Lindbergh in 1927. The aircraft successfully crossed the Atlantic Ocean from New York to Paris with Charles Lindbergh at the controls. Ken Cassens, our chief mechanic and chief restorer, is finishing the covering of the wing. And today he's sanding on some of the struts before he puts a final coat of paint on.
In another nearby storage bay, the replica fuselage awaits completion, along with a number of aircraft used regularly at the aerodrome.
We're in our main storage hangar here at the aerodrome. It's where we keep our airplanes during the air show season so that we can pull them out every Saturday and Sunday and fly them for the public. Also in front of us here, you'll see our Spirit of St. Louis reproduction. This is the fuselage as it's waiting for the wing to be covered and painted so that we can mate the two together. The other airplanes we're seeing here are 2 of our air show performers. The biplane here is a 1918 Curtiss Jenny. This was a trainer in the World War I. On behind it there is a Curtiss Robin. That's the orange and yellow airplane. Same manufacturer and about 10 years later. So you can see the difference in engineering and design over the course of 10 years. The biplane, the Jenny, is right after, right towards the end of World War I. And the Curtiss Robin is really the Learjet of its time. The difference between our museum and other museums is we actually get the airplanes out. They're not static things hanging in a grand hallway or behind a rope where all you get to do is see them sitting there gathering dust.
The top attraction at the Rhinebeck Aerodrome may be the biplane rides guests can experience. Clay Hammond says it is a rush that cannot be described in words.
Taking off in a biplane, for me, is a very, very visceral experience, and I hope for all of our passengers it's the same. It's the wind in your hair, it's the sight of taking all this in with no cabin structure, no windshield or window between you and the outside. So as we're taking off in the biplane, we're departing to the north, and we're coming up above the tree line, and to the left you can see the Catskill Mountains. To the right are the Berkshires of Connecticut and Massachusetts. And in between all that is the Hudson River Valley here, and the Hudson River itself. We're still in that area of the river where it's tidal, so the tides come and go on the river. It's technically, in a lot of ways, it's a fjord for that first 80 miles or so. And it's one of the most beautiful parts of the river, and I think it's one of the most beautiful river systems in the U.S. I've seen the Colorado, I've seen the Mississippi, the Rio Grande, the Columbia, the Missouri, Ohio, name them all. I've seen them all from the air, traveling and flying airplanes, and none of them compare to me, to these rolling, verdant hills of the Hudson River Valley that are just, in the spring and summer, they're beautiful. In the fall, they're golden. Oh, it's just the most beautiful sight you'll ever see in an airplane.
For Clay Hammond, the Rhinebeck Aerodrome is an important piece of aviation history. But for him and others here, the site is a link to their personal past, growing up on the scenic shores of the Hudson River.
I may be a bit of an outlier, but I'm a child of the aerodrome. I was born here. My dad was a pilot and a mechanic in the 80s. So I grew up as a 4-year-old and whatnot during my formative years, running up and down this flight line, pestering everyone for airplane rides. So for me, having grown up here as a kid, I came back as an adult because that feeling of the whole place never left me. I was living and working in the modern world as a corporate pilot, but always pining back for this, this way of life.
From Manhattan's Upper West Side and the incredible George Washington Bridge, to Bear Mountain State Park and the Hudson Highlands, to the mansions and estates lining this pristine waterway. The Hudson River is a mix of world-class city and scenery. And from the sky, we can truly experience the grandeur of this region. And appreciate the conservation efforts of those attempting to learn from lessons of the past and build a sustainable and vibrant future. Here on the edge of America.